Head-to-head.
Well, joining us this morning, I'm delighted to say, Luke Hildyard, Director of the High Pay Centre, and Adam Stott, who is an entrepreneur and business coach. Good morning.
Good morning.
Lovely to see both of you. The stories this morning, they're really, I mean, it's really tough in so many ways. We've talked about these terrible crimes that have taken place, also what's going on the global stage. Now, when I woke up this morning, the story that's leading the news in many news outlets is the United States has dropped more than 125 bombs on Iran's military and allies in Iraq and in Syria as a retaliation for attacks on American troops. Now, the US bombers flew across the Atlantic, some of them. They hit more than 85 targets in Iraq and Syria, including sites held by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Now, this is obviously retaliation on the back of 160 attacks on American forces. We saw those young, really young 3 soldiers being killed as well. And Biden actually said, and I said this at the beginning of the programme, a very pertinent comment. If you harm an American, we will respond. I'm nervous this is escalating and very, very quickly.
Absolutely. I think that is the danger, and the thing that everybody's worried about is that, you know, all of this escalation, there seems to be masses of it going on at the moment in multiple different areas of the world, and essentially this stuff compounding against each other causes bigger problems. But it is a difficult one because, you know, the United States are there, they're getting attacked consistently, and they do have to protect themselves and protect their bases. So it's a very, very difficult one. I think the Biden comment, the way he positioned the comment was, look, we don't want to be escalating, we don't want to be positioning war, but we do have to protect our soldiers. That was the comment, right?
And that's probably a very strong point, actually. It's about a show of defiance, because I'm not sure Iran actually wants to get involved in this. Now, we know that all of those groups are sponsored by Iran, whether it's the Houthis or whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah or whoever it is. But just in terms of this, the United Kingdom, we're now sending another aircraft carrier to the Red Sea to replace the USS Dwight Eisenhower. It's thought either going to be the HMS Prince of Wales or the HMS Queen Elizabeth. At the end of the day, they're protecting the Red Sea, and obviously this is a hugely important shipping lane. Where do you stand on where we are, how we de-escalate this? Because that has to be the outcome that everyone needs.
Yes, I think Adam kind of summed it up nicely in that what America is doing is reactive to the attacks on the US troops, and obviously they do have to and want to respond to that. It is sort of striking how kind of sort of desensitized we've become to this sort of news. I mean, like, America's been bombing the Middle East pretty much my entire life. So when you sort of see headlines that it's, you know, that it's been happening last night, you're kind of like, oh, so what's going on now? I think the sort of question is, what's the sort of long-term strategy? What's the end game? Is it just to sort of contain Iran and, you know, step in if they really step out of line? As you say, these are the attacks are on like Iran-linked militias, as opposed to Iran. They've said they're not going to attack Iran itself.
Iran stepping out of line. What does that look like to you?
Well, it's these Iranian-backed militias attacking the US, attacking the shipping lanes, as you were just saying. There's also the question of how much control over them Iran actually has, because, as you say, they're Iranian backed. They get their sort of money and weaponry from Iran, but there's been a lot of discussion recently about how much control Iran actually has over them, and whether they, you know, whether they're sort of a little bit
Iran says
going
it was
off
not
doing their own
responsible.
thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
They're sort of, you know, they're denying the responsibility. And as I say, a lot of people are saying now that, you know, do the Houthis, the groups in Iraq, in Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon, does Iran actually have that much, you know, complete authority over them?
And you mentioned that actually it was I think it was a considered response. I think Biden and the security team actually took time to decide what to do here. It's not the end of these strikes as well. Yeah. Just in terms of this, I mean, we've obviously got this ongoing conflict, haven't we, with Israel, and that is at the base of this. And I just don't know what that resolution is. So the two-state solution has been widely mooted as the way to go. Netanyahu's been very, very clear that is not happening on his watch. Also, he wants Israel to be in charge of security in a Palestinian state. I don't understand how that could possibly work.
Well, it's all very, very difficult, the politics of it all. I think the danger is, you know, two different things there. The strikes, if they continue these strikes and they continue attacking, all of this just compounds and gets worse. And yeah, all right, Iran are saying they're not responsible for this in the moment, but then what happens when they go and hit the next thing and the next thing? You're just continually creating conflict and it's just making it worse. It's difficult. I think you've got to do everything you can to go in, solve these problems in the most diplomatic way possible, because there's no point in people just keep getting killed all the time and having this mass escalation.
I agree. I just don't know how diplomacy works. Now, also on the back of that, General Sir Patrick Sanders, head of the army, has warned we are not spending enough money on defence. So at the moment we have 75,000 troops in the army. By 2034, in 10 years' time, we'll only have 52,000. We've only got 29,000 in the Navy. There's a really interesting article where he says Britons need to be very clear about the threats that this country faces, and we need to be ready for war. Do you think we could be ready for war?
Well, I think what's kind of interesting, this, I'm going to slightly sort of take it off at a tangent, if it's okay, but I think it's important and related, is that in my work, we do a lot of work on taxation, the super rich, and when you talk about that, people sort of jump up and down, and they don't like taxes. They don't want to sort of punish people who are perceived as being successful or entrepreneurial or whatever. But how do we fund the armed forces, the police, the border force, all these things that are in crisis at the moment? The NHS education service with schools crumbling as well. You've got sort of towering wealth being concentrated in this sort of tiny elite over here, and then you've got stagnating living standards, crumbling public services over here.
But you say that, but actually,
are we not going to use? Are we not going to put the two and two together?
It's what I would say on that. You're talking about terrible living standards. If we can't protect ourselves, those living standards are going to get a lot
of course,
worse.
But it's kind of the same.
Worse, right?
But it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? Like we've got, I think
there's nothing more important than actually defending, with all of this conflict going on in the world. They need to be focused on how do you improve our security.
And that's 100%. The nub, isn't it, Andrew? Yeah. That's the nub, because without defence, without security, you've got nothing.
No.
I completely agree, but you've got to fund it.
But but we have the highest tax burden.
But then your
we've
first instinct is go to the super rich.
We've got a low tax burden compared to a lot of the Western world.
Nothing works in a vacuum, and you're right. It doesn't mean you're excluding one, but it's not just about our defence. The trouble is we're financing policing the world, aren't we? We're supplying weapons to other countries and so on and so forth. And what you need to do, all of those things are right. We need to make sure there's relevant standards of health, of education and so on, and relevant facilities, but it's within that. We also must ensure that we are safe. But you need to look at the whole picture, not just an isolated incident.
And also, just going back to your point, there are those people who are really struggling, but because of fiscal drag, they're being dragged into higher tax brackets. Yeah. So there is a real sense, and we're going to see this as the election approaches. So we've got, you're right, we've got this push-pull saying we need to increase our defence spending, so from 2.3% where it should be. And we were talking about this last week. Yes. Should it be 5%, for example? At the same time, of course, people feel incredibly stretched. We've got a general election coming up. Now we've got both major parties saying they're going to give tax cuts.
Exactly, and you've just had the International Monetary Fund taking a sort of independent look at Britain and saying that that's not credible. So I think, you've, as I say, on the one hand, this is kind of my point. You've got the parties promising tax cuts. You've got virtually every single public service in crisis, and you've got, billionaires. Their wealth is like that, while the tax burden on them is kind of flat.
You've still got the government supporting a huge state as well, right? So it goes both ways. You can't just look and go, the evil billionaires have got all the money, and that needs to be...
You're right, and I think we need to take that sort of incentive
You've got to have a balanced view, and that isn't a balanced view to just say, let's take it off of them and then give it to us.
But talking about balance, what you need to do, nobody really understands percentages. What you need to do is say, this is how much different things cost to achieve a certain level. This is what it means in terms of your tax money. So it's actually about communication, isn't it?
100%.
If you tell 100%, it's a lot of tax. But if you tell people, close there. If you tell people where your money's going for, you're easier to persuade them on that sort of basis.
When you do a percentage and you say a percentage of GDP, it desensitises how much money
Nobody
you're actually
knows what it
spending.
means.
So what you actually need to look at budgeting in a much different way than a percentage of GDP. And you need to get the other countries to come and also, get involved with NATO.
Well, that's a very
we are doing our bit. We need to do
of the
more,
world, and that's
but then
expensive.
you need to go out and push those things to do the same.
Sorry, I was just going to say, this article, which was in the Telegraph this week, talks about what would happen in the event of a war, and it's very sobering reading indeed, about metro stations or underground stations used as air raid shelters, key bridges dynamited. We'd have actually no infrastructure. You might only bring things in by Eurostar through the tunnel, for example. We don't have any manufacturing in this country. Look what we're doing in Port Talbot. What are we doing? We're decimating our industry for the sake of this peg of net zero. Isn't that bonkers?
Well, again,
is it bonkers?
Well, I think getting to net zero and prevent... I think if you look at every objective study... No, it's a no. Every objective study of climate change says it's going to make a lot of these problems elsewhere. But it is a security issue. That's the key thing.
Hang on a minute.
I mean,
if we don't have blast furnaces, we can't create steel. We need steel.
Well, again, I think we should be looking at greener ways to make steel. But I do completely agree that we should be supporting our industry. But I think it's a false choice to make it a choice between that and between our climate objectives.
Because you look at the countries that oppose us.
Just one sec. So many of the problems in the in parts of the world that are where real security threats to Britain are originating, it comes from things that are climate related and that are getting worse because of climate change. So I think we absolutely need to defend our manufacturing, but we also need to make sure that we prevent climate change from getting out of control, because that's only going to make our security issues miles worse.
The climate has nothing to do with foreign aggressors like Russia. It has nothing to do with terrorism. It has nothing to do with any of that.
Well, it does actually, because it exacerbates poverty, instability in parts of the world that are already poor and unstable, and it drives people into the arms of these terrorists. That's not to sort of excuse it, but it's just the fact that places that are poorer and are having bigger socio-economic problems are more likely to become volatile and dangerous.
So what people need are more informed discussions, because what happens is the rhetoric and the extremism just switches people off. So what you need to do is say, have an informed discussion. These are the consequences of these actions, and then people can make an informed decision.
Let me just ask you, Luke, there's also a lot of talk about having a citizen army. We talked about this national service before. My father went into national service. I'm too young to know national service. But also, there's also this new scheme. Again, this is from Patrick Sanders, the General Staff Chief of General Staff. He said that gap year students should be paid to undergo some form of military training. So after school, you go in for a bit of military training, you get a taste of it, you understand camaraderie, you get some sort of sense of rules and discipline, and maybe that's a brilliant idea.
I actually quite like the idea, and I'll tell you why. Is because I think society is becoming very, very glass-like. And what I mean by that is everybody's very sensitive. I think discipline, focus, and actually the things that, I've not been in the military, I'll be clear about that, but it does bring a sense of discipline and focus to people, and if they're going to get paid to do it and they're willing to do it, it could be a really good idea, and it could really, give some good principles and foundations to young people in this country.
Principle is important.
Principles and foundations.
You need to get the idea of society and community back. Discipline is also important, and so on and so on. When I was growing up, we had CCF, Combined Cadet Forces, at school. You had the itchy trousers on a Monday and marched up and down meaninglessly, but that's what you had. The idea of discipline and understanding that you can assist people is got to be good. It also helps people prepare for other aspects in life, because getting organised and having what we talked about, a purpose, has got to be important.
Luke?
Yeah, I think it sounds quite a good idea. I think it'd be, as Adam says, I think it would be a good sort of way of instilling some decent values into young people. My caveat, I guess, would be a bunch of 19-year-olds scraped off the couch for a month of training. I don't think that's going to have Vladimir Putin quaking in his boots. And also, I'd come back to the point I keep making. They're obviously saying they're going to be paid for this. We're going to have to find the money from somewhere. I know we're going to sort of disagree on this. I'll just come back to my point about a quarter of the wealth in the country being held by 1% of the population. Okay. You could tax them a little bit more. While protecting,
don't they then?
So look, you could tax them a little bit more, and they'd still be extremely
so investment
rich.
Creates a return. So, if you invest in unproductive members of society, you give them discipline, focus, and values. That's where the money will come back, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're going to produce for the economy further on.
But one more thing.
We're in complete agreement. I think I agree that investing in people will be good for them.
But those high earners tend to employ people. Let's say, and if you overtax them, they leave the country.
Exactly.
Again, the evidence on this is very thin. You look at the reforms. No, it is. You look at the reforms to non-dom status.
The non-dom tax will drive people out of this country.
It has the reforms to it. The number of people that left was tiny compared to the tax revenue it generated. Norway introduced a wealth. Norway introduced a wealth tax, and a few people did leave. But they'd have needed 15 times as many people to have left for it to have discounted the money that it raised. It was a real revenue generator. Look, I absolutely think that people should be rewarded for success and for starting businesses and stuff. I'm just saying that we need, security. We need no.
So
I think people should be. We need good public services.
Yes.
And
the bottom line is
reward success.
People that build businesses create wealth, and they employ people, which stimulates the economy.
Exactly.
And economic growth is stimulated through business. And the people that have got the creativity, the work ethic, and put the time and effort into doing that should be rewarded.
So can I ask you one simple question? One simple question. Very, very simple question. So if you're saying that it's wrong on those statistics, people leave. If it were true, and we can find evidence, would you then say that it is wrong to do it?
I'd then say that we need to have international coordination to ensure we can get a sort of fair and meaningful tax contribution. I think yes, we need great public services that we need to, and that we could be getting a more meaningful tax contribution from people who, even after they pay tax, would still be incredibly rich and well rewarded for success, as they should be.
The last thing I want is international coordination. The whole point of Brexit was to devolve ourselves, so we set our own rules, we set our own tax, and we have our own vision for the world.
We're in a global economy. And
we may well be, but then we need to undercut. We track the best and the brightest.
We're always going to be affected by what other countries are doing, so we do have to work with them on things like the global economy, security,
I think you're really underestimating how much tax that people pay in terms of that are running businesses. You've got corporation tax, NI, PAYE, VAT. You're taxed on absolutely everything, and if you squeeze it too much, you're not going to allow people to evolve and create that economic stimulus.
But everybody is taxed a lot. I'm sure we all pay a lot of tax around it. And I clarify, I'm not talking about a small business owner who works hard and is really successful. I'm talking about plutocrats, billionaires, oligarchs who are worth billions and would still be worth billions even after paying a bit more tax.
I need to pause you. Just have a breath whilst we take a break. I've just got some breaking news for you. One person is seriously injured after 3 people have been stabbed at a railway station in Paris. So one person seriously injured, 3 stabbed at a railway station in Paris. We'll bring you more on that as and when we get it. We're going to continue with this conversation after the break. I want to also talk about what's going on with our asylum system. Abdul Azidi, he was granted asylum after failing it twice. What on earth is going on in this country? This is Talk TV. To talk today with me, David Bull. The time 8:47 now on Saturday, February the 3rd. That breaking news again. One person is seriously injured. 3 people have been stabbed at a railway station in Paris. We'll bring you more on that as and when we get it. Lots of messages coming in about our conversation. Gaza in Yorkshire, good morning to you. Gaza says, Lou, you're blind to the facts. So Port Talbot and all those people lose their jobs so a foreign country and a government can make the same product and ship it back to us. And Luke, you'd say you're an entrepreneur. This country has sold off its industry to the lowest bidder to import everything we need, and they're bothered about a 1% contribution to global warming. I'll let you answer that because it's.
No, but I agree. We should be defending the Port Talbot Steelworks. Sorry, I'm just saying that blaming net zero efforts.
1% of global emissions from here.
Well, every country's there's nearly
1%.
200. That's actually an outsized share compared to our share of the population. But every country forms quite a small proportion of total emissions. But we've all got to bring them down.
Okay. Oh, this is a great idea. Let's get the Chinese to produce our steel, a potential enemy producing our steel. Thank you very much indeed. This country, Mick says, will not be safe whilst the civil service, police, church and BBC are run by lefty political biased bosses. And this also says, how do we defend the country when we have thousands of unknown military-aged men crossing the channel supported by the left and the church? And this goes back to Abdul Azidi. Now, I did this story yesterday on the show, but, you know, this is... what is going on in the Home Office? So you've got this man who comes here illegally on the back of a lorry from Afghanistan, applies for asylum, by the way, commits a sexual offence, turned down twice, then gets given asylum, and now, obviously, he then commits this atrocity. It's not fit for purpose.
Well, there needs to be much more stringent checks and better decision making, right? If it's been refused, yes, and it's been refused twice, then it needs to be followed through, right? I think that the way that he stayed in the country was a priest supported him and said that he'd changed his religion
to Christianity.
Yes. I mean, but that, I don't understand how that instantly makes you a good person. And it's not about asylum, and what it's about is if you are going to commit crime in this country and you are going to do heinous things and horrible things, then you shouldn't be here, and we should be stringent about
and it goes back to communication, as we always say. People need to have clarity as to what the rules are, because not all asylum seekers are wrong, which it's not about that. It's people who abuse the system. Go for the rules.
Let the rules say where a person is required to sign the sex offenders register, you must refuse or cancel entry clearance or permission on the grounds of serious harm. That is the guidance.
So very simple. So it should be revoked.
So it should be revoked.
Very simple.
But you see, this is why people have lost faith in what is going on in this country.
So you're right. So the distinction is, because a lot of people have a go on social media and say, oh, we're all talking about asylum. It's important to talk about the abuses. And where those abuses happen, let's call it out and get it rectified.
I agree. Just in terms of that, I mean, it comes back to a much bigger issue. We know that the immigration will be, and I keep saying it will be, I think, the predominant theme of the general election. But also, we've now got 1,000 people who've come here illegally this year already. Rishi Sunak says he's going to stop the boats. Suella Braverman has used this to say we need to leave the ECHR. And here we've got the Safety of Rwanda bill going through. We're in the House of Lords. We're in the committee stage. It will go through, won't it?
I wouldn't know, to be honest. I think it's a plan that's had a lot of controversy, to say the least. I mean, as a sort of liberal kind of lefty type, I'll say something that will hopefully ingratiate me a little bit more with the
our audience love you.
With the audience, in that processing people seeking to immigrate here in a third country doesn't seem the most sort of unreasonable project in the world. I do think we need to make sure that they're treated humanely and the process is done properly. But obviously, it's the politics around it is really complicated at the moment. And again, I would say, we were talking earlier about international coordination and stuff. Yeah, again, immigration. These are the immigration sort of trails extend across continents, multiple countries. We do need to be working with other countries on this. So it's an example of how we are integrated into a global economy, and we do need sort of multinational structures and partnerships as well.
Okay. I also think it devalues the audience at home just saying it's left or right. I think the reality is give people the facts and they can make informed decisions and encourage all views. That's what we try and do.
The fact is that person shouldn't have been in the country when that crime was committed.
It was an abuse.
And it's got nothing to do with asylum. Well, it has got to do with asylum. It shouldn't have been in the country because he broke the rules in terms of what we should be here and shouldn't be here. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, both of you. Luke Hildyard, Director of the High Pay Centre, and Adam Stott, entrepreneur and business coach. And that was today's Head to Head. Head to Head.